welcome to the roundtable. I guess this will be a podcast. The topic today is going to be the art of war, and we're going to talk about tactics and strategy. My name is Shogun. My co-host today will be Surprise. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Mr. Ainsoft for recording. How are you doing today, Surprise?
Doing very well. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. So basically the way I conceive of war is that war has two fundamental aspects, one being strategy and one being tactics. In my philosophy, at least classically speaking, there's two major treatises or philosophies or whatever they've been written about this. One is Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and the other is Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings. Now, Sun Tzu was a general, and he wrote a book of military philosophy for generals, which is strategy. It's a higher order level of thinking that has to do with large armies, mobilization of troops, fucking supply chains, tactics, and terrain and all these things. Tactics is more like squad-based and unit-based combat. It could even apply even to a single person, combat tactics. So strategy and Sun Tzu's The Art of War is at a larger scale. It's like, America versus Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran, nationwide, But tactics is like clearing a building house by house, or how to fucking, take cover and shoot from behind cover, or cover and move, etc. Now, I'm not a military guy, and nevertheless I find this fascinating. My background is martial arts, which definitely has tactics, right? We talk about something called ring generalship, and we talk about something called fight IQ. And I think essentially the art of war is what we call fight IQ. It's like when hostilities have been initiated, who has the intelligence to manipulate the situation successfully? So I'm assuming that Surprise has some background in this. I know he's not necessarily a combat soldier as much as intelligence or whatever, but nevertheless, this is very interesting, and I don't want to soapbox too long, but the reason I think it's so important is this. Killing for the sake of killing is exciting and fun, and people like it, like Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles. But that's not really what it's about. It's not about, fucking Vince McMahon beat the Undertaker and Brock Lesnar beat the California Kid or whatever. That's one level, right? Who's famous, who's cool. Really what it's about is protecting things. The reason that war matters so much is that when other people try to make war on you, you either die or you win. And if you don't win, they take your kids, they rape your kids, they take your wife, they enslave your wife, they kill you, they cut your head off. They burn your house down, they burn your churches, they burn your temples, they burn your libraries. So there is no cultural continuity, there is no religious continuity, there's no tradition, there's no family, there's no offspring. Like literally nothing in this world, for whatever crazy ass reason, that can exist without violence. And without the skilled application of violence under a framework of intelligence, then anything good will be destroyed by shitheads. It's just that simple. If you can't kill all the shitheads, you will die. And if you die, then the people who depend on you will die. And that's why the art of war matters. So that being said, I'm not sure how to kind of break into this. I just want to ask Surprise, do you have any kind of take on this? Have you read either The Art of War or the Book of Five Rings, or received any kind of training in this area, or have any thoughts about it?
Well, my training is not combat related. As you mentioned, I would just give an honorable mention to Shastra, who's here, Emperor. It's more of a statecraft. It's all encompassing, but it does go into war. And then, of course, Clausewitz's book on war. Now, I would develop what you said a little bit and say that there's also a third level, sandwich between tactics and strategies, which would be operational. So you've got tactical, operational, strategic.
I'm sorry, Surprise, you're not terrible, but can you just try leaving the room and coming back real quick just to see if it clarifies your connection a bit?
Yeah.
I think his mic sensitivity is cutting out.
All right, how's that?
So far, so good.
Okay, yeah, what I was saying was that there's kind of 3 tiers to it. In ascending order, it's tactics, operations, and then strategy. So tactics, like Shogun's already described, You've got your squad tactics, your company level, maybe even
I'm sorry to interrupt, but anyone who's not currently talking, please keep your mic closed. I think it's Mr. Richard Dawson who's creating mic spam that we can't hear surprise, but just keep your mic closed so we can hear the person who's speaking, and only open your mic when you're speaking, please. Sorry, surprise. Go ahead.
No worries. Operational would be more like Operation Market Garden or Operation Barbarossa, something is larger than tactical that serves strategic aims. Like we want to capture Soissons. That'd be more of the it's not sort of in between level. But yeah, I mean, the art of war, it's all encompassing intelligence, it's logistics, it's tactical competency, operational awareness, strategic clarity.
Surprise, this is really good material, but there's some kind of static happening over your mic. I don't know if your mic's rubbing on something or what it is, but I want to hear this clearly.
Let me try this.
Now it's better. That's a lot better. That's a lot better.
Okay, I'll do it like this. But with that, I think we can get into it.
Well, that's a really good point, and thank you for pointing that out. I didn't really think of that. So when people ask me, well, nobody asked me necessarily this, but I've thought about this. If there was only 3 books that I could have to pass on to future generations, it wouldn't be the Talmud, I guarantee you. It wouldn't be the Torah. It wouldn't be the Quran. It wouldn't be the Gospels. It wouldn't be the Bible. It would be 3 books. It would be Miyamoto Musashi, the Book of 5 Rings, which is a masterpiece of tactics and combat philosophy at a personal level, how to win one-on-one fights and duels. Then you'd have Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which is how to wage war at a strategic level of like nations and armies. And then you have Lao Tse, the Tao Te Ching. And this is like more subtle. We're not going to talk about that necessarily here. It does apply to martial combat, but it's too subtle to get into. Now, I don't know a book of operations, but what Surprise said is very true, right? So tactics would be, I'm going to breach this building and sweep it room by room, looking for hostages and killing terrorists. Well, that's a tactical operation. If you say, I'm going to take over China and invade mainland China, establish a beachhead, penetrate to the interior, fight a counterinsurgency war in Shenzhen province and Wugang province, and seize the oil fields in Lengmeng or whatever, right? I'm just making these terms up. Then that would be strategy. But what he's saying is operation. So it'd be like, okay, well, we're going to seize a beachhead in this particular country, like Operation D-Day, Operation, Normandy, that would be an operation. So that's a very good point. There's really 3 levels. Now, tactics begins on the one-on-one combat level. Operations would be a series of squad-based missions, and strategy would be a nation-state or military-level endeavor. But the thing is, each of these overlaps with philosophy, right? It's a crazy thing, but when you think hard enough about how to kill people, you actually learn how to live. You actually learn how to deal with people, how to carry yourself with integrity. So, I mean, there's even levels to this, right? So let me bring Sir Shattuck into this, right? Like, you've done, what, one-on-one? Do you say melee or melee? I don't know why I can never remember this. Is it melee or melee combat? This is a question for Sir Shattuck. I don't know if you're at the mic. Apparently he's not. He does medieval recreation.
It's melee.
It's melee, right? So if you're doing melee combat, right, you would be fighting either swordsmanship, like a duel, like a one-on-one duel, like Miyamoto Musashi did. Now, I kind of want to talk about Miyamoto Musashi. They call him the sword saint of Japan. He killed 63 people, something over 60, in one-on-one katana duels. And the number 2 best sword fighter of all time killed less than 30. So less than half as many as him. So he was by far the greatest armed combat melee fighter of all time. And he wrote the Book of 5 Rings, which was all about how to win fights and stuff. And it's stuff you wouldn't necessarily think. Like, it's all psyops. So, for example, every time Miyamoto Musashi would challenge someone to a duel, he would show up like 20 or 30 minutes late or more, like an hour late, 2 hours late. So he'd challenge someone to a duel, at high noon in a certain spot. And then he'd show up like 2, 3, 4 hours late. So by the time that he showed up, his opponent would be so agitated and so irritated and so unhappy and so feeling so disrespected that he would then fight poorly. So you see that like every military operation is a psychological operation, and every psychological operation is in some sense military. You see what I'm saying? So we can say we're going to fight at noon, but who says we actually have to fight at noon? And then you could say, well, there's some kind of rule of law that says you have to fight with only one sword, but Miyamoto Musashi fought with two swords. Like, there's a statement that says all's fair in love and war, which isn't really true. Because, in fact, things can be unfair in love and in war. But when the stakes are life and death, people don't necessarily respect this. So I'm just kind of freeballing here because there's so many aspects to this, right? Because what's the difference between terrorism and combat? What's the difference between a uniformed soldier and an ununiformed insurgent? What's the difference between a war crime and an act of war? Was nuclear bombing Hiroshima a war crime, or was it an act of war? Like, we're just going to kind of break into this and talk about this. Like, but the number one thing I want to say is the fundamental validity of violence. Like, violence is fundamentally valid. How do you know this? Well, what happens if you are the father of a household? You have one wife and two children, a son and a daughter. Your son and your daughter are sleeping in their bedrooms. Your wife is sleeping. Someone breaks in. You hear the door break open. You are the only man in the house. You have a baseball bat beside your bed. You grab that baseball bat. Now, what do? Do you run to the front door and go, hey, who's the fuck in there? And you run. Well, maybe he has a pistol. And as soon as you shout, who's the fuck there, he shoots you and you're dead. And then it's game over. Your kids and your family die. Alternatively, how about this? You go to your bedroom door, okay? So your bedroom door opens inward. That's just the way the door frame works. So what you do is you position yourself on the right side of the door frame with your back to the door and the baseball bat grasped firmly in both hands, and you remain silent. You gesture at your family to be silent. You do the finger to the lips. It's a tactical signal. Don't make a sound. You wait until the person sneaks in, thinking they're sneaking in. Then you hit them in the back of the head. Now, you have a positional advantage here because your back is to the wall. They can't see you, but you can see them. When they enter the room with their pistol pointed forward, looking for a target, you're already behind their line of sight. You strike them cleanly at the base of the skull. You don't strike them in the shoulder. You don't strike them in the back. You don't strike them in the mid-back or any other point. You strike them in the base of the skull. If you strike them strongly enough in the base of the skull with a baseball bat, they'll be rendered unconscious. You can remove the pistol and you will have saved your family. Now, if you do anything differently than this, so let's say you run straight to engage him too quickly, he sees you, he shoots you, you die. Let's say you position yourself in the wrong way so that you're in his line of fire, you die. Let's say you reveal your position by making a noise, etc., you die. So it's all about the tactical use of your skills, your weapons, right? And you don't even need a baseball bat. Even if he had a pistol and you had no weapon whatsoever, you could actually jump on someone from behind, put him in a rear naked choke, and even if he had a pistol, you could put him in a rear naked choke and choke him unconscious and he would have no way to turn that pistol around on you because you attacked him from behind. So the point of this is twofold. One is why do you fight, and two is how do you fight. The why do you fight is clear. It's to protect the people you love, right? If you're not protecting the people you love, then war is just a matter of taking your resources and this or that. The reason I think this is worth doing an event upon is because ultimately, and people will deny this, everything of value in life depends on killing. It's an unfortunate fact, but people will say, oh, well, killing is evil, violence is bad. Shush. But if you don't have the ability to exert superior violence with superior skill, then anything you can possibly build, whatever sandcastle you might build on the shore, will be simply destroyed by someone malevolent. Like, let's say you have a little girl by the shore, and she spends 4 hours building a sandcastle. And then the shore is coming up, and some little boy walks by, and he just says, hey, I want to kick that sandcastle over. He kicks it over. Well, in this case, nothing has been actually hurt, but imagine that sandcastle was filled with real human beings. Who's going to save that sandcastle full of human beings? Like the actual children that will be crushed. Like, so
as Jimi Hendrix said, castle's made of sand, chop it down with the edge of my hand.
Perfectly said, exactly. Chop it down with the edge of your hand. That's the judo chop, the quote-unquote judo chop.
Isn't that fake? Isn't judo chop not a thing? It's just like a joke.
It's a complete joke because judo is a pure grappling art with no strikes whatsoever. So the whole concept of a judo chop is like, it's backwards. There is no judo chop. Nevertheless, you know, castles made of sand fade into the sea eventually. That's the Jimi Hendrix song. Well, yeah, they do. So the Chinese Empire succumbed to Genghis Khan. Why? Because Genghis Khan's art of war was superior. So even if the Chinese had a superior style of tea ceremony, a superior style of religion, a superior style of culture, and in every way was just objectively a superior culture, if Genghis and his, like, you know, stinking horde of barbarians wearing mouse skin robes and shooting arrows from horseback and drinking mare blood and milk could kill the Chinese, then the Chinese culture will not exist anymore. So it's like a paradox, right? You can be like, this culture is more valuable, this culture is more noble, but only the culture that can kill better will continue to exist. So first you have to establish a better system of killing, and then you can establish a better culture. If you establish a better system of culture, but an inferior system of killing, then your culture will only exist until a superior system of killing destroys you. And they may never even understand what they destroyed. So therefore, I will say, I've learned, you can invest all your eggs in one basket, but if you cannot kill whoever tries to take that basket, you have no eggs at all.
And history bears that out. You look at the Romans, the Persians, the British, us. Every single one of them learned how to be or was warlike before they ever rose to any position of high power. Military primacy is the precondition for any sort of cultural, civilizational, like, straight
Exactly.
up. It's not a good Sunday school story, and you know, you don't have to tell kids, but that's the way of the world.
That's right. So the way I kind of realized it was, I fell in love with a girl, and I invested a huge amount of time and resources into her. Like, I had to, like, psychologically build her up and, like, restore her emotionally, give her unconditional love and encouragement and help her figure out this and that. Like, every single day you invest into your wife, your child, your house, your farm, something you care about. But it only takes one psychopath who comes along with, like, a broken bottle jacked up on meth to be like, you know, you're a demon. And then they just stab them and they're dead. They're gone forever. You never, ever get them back. You can't pray them back to life.
Are you gonna say that meth users are fucking crazy now? Did you know in 1980, 40% of the U.S. Army tested positive for methamphetamine?
Well, my point is, right, if someone wants to do, well, you're not wrong, but you're not right either. So the point is, my point of saying meth is, it doesn't matter what someone's motivation is. It doesn't matter what someone's excuse is. Maybe someone was abused as a child. Maybe someone has a drug addiction. Maybe they're drunk. Maybe they're crazy, mentally ill, head trauma. Like, it makes no difference. The point is, if you have a daughter, a son, a wife, a husband, a house, a farm, a civilization, a castle, a feudal kingdom, and whether it's a horde of barbarians or one, you know, crackhead or one mentally ill person who wants to kill you all, you only have two options. Either the father of that household or the king or the duke of that feudal dukedom is powerful enough to repel the threat, or he isn't. Well, if he isn't, here's what's going to happen. The invading force is going to break open the door or break open the gates. They're going to rape your son and daughter. They're going to rape your wife. They're going to rape you. They're going to kill you. It shouldn't be this way. Nobody's saying it should be, but it is actually this way. You know, there is no moral law that's incumbent on anybody. So the only way that you can enforce anything is through force. And hopefully the people who have the skill to enforce violence are also benevolent. Usually they're not. But this is the only way. You can't argue, you can't negotiate, you can't debate, you can only kill or be killed. That's why the art of war is the supreme art. It is the most important. It's the foundation of everything else. And whoever has it is the trump card. It's the ace of spades. It invalidates everything else. You just have to hope the good guy has it.
Let's not go jerking each other off about it just yet. I was trying to bring up the point about meth, though, and that every war dating back to surprises of the Roman Empire have been fought on either alcohol, mushrooms, or some other potions or some other concoctions. World War II was all on meth. Up until 1965, the Air Force was all on meth. Everybody's been under all these warriors and soldiers. The art of war is doping up your dudes and sending them blitzkrieging, is what I'm trying to point out.
Shogun,
that's not true.
Can I ask a question, Shogun,
They even
in
made
relation to
fun of
war
it.
crimes? Why
Yeah,
are there such thing as war
that's how you get
crimes?
war crimes. So they even made fun of it in the Star
Hold
Trek
on,
Farpoint, if you
NSA.
recall.
Hold on a second. What was your question, Ansel?
Yeah, why are there war crimes? I mean, when someone says they go to war, it's like it's all or nothing. So why are there like laws in relation to war? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to invade a country, you do everything you can to take over that country. So why are there rules and regulations in relation to the war? I don't understand that.
Well, it's like in a fight. It's so the rules of engagement do not undermine Shogun's point about the necessity of engagement. So just like if in a fight you don't, it's like, yeah, we're gonna fight, but if you gouge my eyes out, that's a foul, and you're gonna see the consequence. Similarly, I mean, you can have a war. War is unfortunately a fact of life. However, I mean, if you gas civilians, then that's going to be, of course, it varies with the intensity of the war. It varies with the context. Probably what we did with Dresden was a war crime, but guess what? We won. So they went on trial. We didn't. So it is there. Unfortunately, it is also outside of just blatant heinous shit like the Holocaust. It's a lot of gray area. There's more gray than probably black and white when it comes to something that literally the aim is to kill people. And then once you get into, okay, what's the most ethical way to kill people? Who are you allowed to kill? Very slippery slope. And we try to work that out, which I think is a credit to humanity. We try to draw some lines, but you're already on the slope. I mean, you've already left off the edge at that point.
Yeah, so there are rules to engagement and that supposedly both warring parties had to adhere to.
Well, not necessarily. The thing is this. Honor, okay, so a warrior is somebody who kills. Like, if you look up the definition of warrior, it's determined as either a soldier or a fighter. So there's only two classes of people who are qualified to actually call themselves warriors. And I actually get quite triggered when people claim this title for themselves who don't deserve it. But a warrior can only either be a soldier, meaning a sailor, a Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, Navy SEAL, gun carrying, military operative. That would be one kind of warrior. And the other kind is a fighter, which would then be like a mixed martial artist, a UFC fighter, a kickboxer. Either of these classes of people can be called a warrior. They are bellators, okay? Fighters, like warriors. That's a warrior. Now, honor is the code of conduct that regulates war and warriors. So a noble warrior or an honorable warrior is one who follows a code of conduct. Now, a warrior will always fight with honor until he can't or until his opponent doesn't. So I'll give you an example. If I'm in a bar and a guy grabs my girlfriend's ass, just grabs it, and he's upset, it's now incumbent on me honorably to fight this man. But so then I can square off and fight him and punch him or kick him, grapple him, throw him. I can do any number of things. But what I can't do is like take a bottle, break it, and like stab him in the neck. So basically, what you'd be calling this would be unvalidated or unjustified escalation. It's like you escalated too far. Like we were already going to fight. Like you could have broken my nose. You could have given me a black eye. You could have given me a concussion. You could have knocked me out. I might even have died. But to just go straight to breaking a bottle and stabbing me in the throat when we weren't really there, like we were thinking that we were just going to have this fight and one of us was going to get fucked up, but we're both going to go home. The best example of this is the sucker punch. Like, what is a sucker punch? Well, a sucker punch is you go up to someone, you're like, oh, hey, buddy, can I borrow a cigarette? Bow! And you punch him in the side of the head. That's called a sucker punch. So you didn't square off. You didn't say, hey, buddy, let's go outside. Let's fight. That would be honorable. If you say, hey, buddy, can I borrow a cigarette? Sucker punch, that's dishonorable. Now, it's not that you can never do anything dishonorable. Sometimes you might have to. But it has to be necessary, it has to be unavoidable, and it has to be initiated by the other person, essentially. So if somebody comes at me with a knife in a back alley and I didn't do anything to them, there is no war crimes in that situation, right? Because this person has already shown themselves to be completely beyond any kind of moral sanity. So basically, all a war crime means is meeting someone on the level they propose to you, right? So here's an example. In Discord, me and you can disagree, and then we can debate. And I'll say point A, and you'll say point B. I'll say point C, you say point D. At the end of the day, we can say good game, shake hands. If you then say, hey, point A, I say point B, you say point C, I say, well, I don't know what to say to point C, I don't know point D, so I'm going to dox you, reveal your face, raid your server, make false reports, circulate CP on your server, and get it taken down. Like, that would be the equivalent of a war crime. It's like, you shot at my people, I shot at your people, you nuked my hospitals. It's like, wait, what? Like, that escalation just jumped like 10 steps. That's essentially all a war crime is. It's like escalating an excessive amount for an insufficient reason. But at the end of the day, if somebody jumps on my wife or my daughter, yeah, I'll rip his throat out with my teeth if I have to, right? I'll stab him in the eyes if I have to. I'll rip his testicles off if I have to. But the question is, do you have to, or can you defeat him in a more honorable way, right? So essentially, the strategy of military and the ethics of military and the law of military is determined very simply: minimum necessary force. Anything that exceeds minimum necessary force is essentially a war crime, and it is dishonorable. So if I'm in an MMA fight, I can punch you in the head, I can kick you in the head, I can do a spinning back fist, a spinning elbow, but I can't bite you. I can't fish hook you. I can't reach into your cheeks and rip your cheeks off with my fingers. I can't gouge your eyes out, because it's not minimum necessary force. If I can knock you out with a head kick, I should do that, but I shouldn't bite your eyes out. Like, that's the equivalent of like nuclear weapons, radiological weapons, biological weapons, torture, terrorism, civilians attacking hospitals, attacking churches. It's just like shitty conduct. It's shitty conduct, and the reason it matters is because wars aren't only won by force, they're won by hearts and minds. So if you win a quote-unquote conflict, but you alienate the entire population, the international community, the legal community, and the group of people, you're not winning. In order to win, you have to be the good guy. The bad guy cannot win, right? Because if the bad guy wins, then everybody loses. So in order to successfully launch any military campaign, you have to be capable of positioning yourself as the good guy. Now, it's true that Black Ops would allow you to do this while actually being the bad guy and appearing to be the good guy, but you have to at least appear to be the good guy, and war crimes make this impossible. That's really all it comes down to. The reason a war crime is not because it's really that different to burn someone with a flamethrower, shoot them with a gun, nuke them with a nuke, virus them with a virus. Like, at the end of the day, all these things are horrible. But honor is a standard of martial conduct. It's like a code of honor that people hold themselves to. And even if you win, so for example, I know I'm kind of soapboxing or microphone hogging here, and I'll get off the mic right away, but John Jones is the best mixed martial artist who's ever lived, right? He's the best unarmed combat fighter who's ever lived. Now, he does a technique where he reaches out as if he's testing range. And this is a normal thing, right? You reach out, you test range, you find your opponent. You reach your hand out, you touch him, and you find his range. But what he does is he keeps his hand open and upright, and he reaches out and he paws. And then he paws in the face, and he touches them in the eyes. So he just puts his hand out and touches them in the eyes, touches them in the eyes. But if you poke someone in the eyes, they can't fight anymore. It's against the rules. It's illegal. It's dishonorable. But he gets away with it because he's cheating. He's cheating. So cheating is simply violating the agreed upon rules of the game, and if you do it, you might win this particular tactical engagement, but you'll lose strategically because you'll lose ideologically. You'll become the bad guy. Nobody will support you. Nobody will want to be your ally, and everyone will be sad if you win, and then they'll turn against you eventually. So the key is not just to kill people, it's to kill people in a way where people won't hate you forever for doing so.
Wow. Thanks for that, Shogun. Appreciate the response. That's really interesting. My wife was mentioning the Nuremberg trials, war trials after World War II, crimes against humanity. She said it was mainly to deter future war crime atrocities. So it's a preventative measure as well. So, like, if you're going to start a war, be prepared to be punished for war crimes.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way, right? Let's say you have John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson for the light heavyweight championship of the world. Well, what's being contested is light heavyweight championship of the world, and both of these guys have been locked in a cage. So if they're thinking tactically, they'll say, I'll do whatever I have to do to win, because all that matters is I win, I need to get the belt, and I need to not lose this fight. the consequences of losing are so great. I'll get a head trauma, I'll get a contusion, a brain concussion. Therefore, anything I could possibly do will be justified. But let's say that then in the fight you bite your opponent. Well, this happened on TV. Everybody saw you. It's all on record. They'll circulate that. You'll be disgraced. You'll be disqualified. Your victory will be commuted to a no contest or an actual forfeit. So whatever tactical gain you gain by using viral combat or gas attacks or terrorism, suicide bombers, child soldiers, attacking hospitals, you might get a tactical victory, but strategically you're ultimately going to lose because you're going to become the bad guy. Look at Hitler, right? What happened when he invaded Poland or whatever? He did so against international law. I mean, Surprise probably going to correct me. I'm saying like the wrong country or some shit, but he basically violated international law. He went through, what was it, Belgium, Brussels? I might even be mixing up World War I and World War II.
Well, I mean, he did eventually go through Belgium, but yeah, I think it was Czechoslovakia, Poland, and then Norway, and then basically France. I mean, the attacks on the Low Countries were a bit of a fight.
So my point is, he may have tactically been able to say, well, you know, Belgium or Czechoslovakia is undefended, and my soldiers are capable of moving through it unrestrained, and nothing they can bring to bear will stop us, and laws are just words on pages, and rules are just on paper. But my tanks are real, and what we do is real. So I can just ignore the law, but then what happens? You do that, and then the international community says, holy shit, Germany just like marched through 3 neutral countries and broke all our international laws. So even if we're neutral about which country wins or loses, we don't really care. We don't really want to allow the rules of the game to change in a way that will allow this to happen, because this will be very destabilizing. So it's like for UFC fighters, they're willing to fucking annihilate each other, like mash each other to pieces. But trust me, I'm a fighter, right? I'm willing to get in there and get knocked out or concussed or, you know, kicked in the head, but I don't want you to reach your fingers into my mouth, hook your index and middle finger inside my cheek, and then rip my cheek off my face and expose all the teeth on my face. That's ghoulish. It's ghastly. It's just like evil. And it's like, we can fight and you can punch me 10 times in the head and give me a head concussion, but I don't want you to reach your thumbs and stick them in my eyes and blind me for the rest of my life so I can never see again. And the thing is, you might win a fight by doing that, but then everyone else is going to say, holy shit, that guy did that? We need to kill him now so he doesn't do that to anybody else. So there's an ethical dimension and a strategic dimension to honor. One is that if you dishonor yourself, then people will have like an incentive to kill you. And that's why even in war, there are conduct standards. Like, even though war is hellish, we do set limits on it. And it's right that we do that. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, just contrast Germany in 1939 to 45 versus the, when was it, 1866 when they fought the Austrians? I mean, Bismarck specifically instructed not to humiliate the Austrians. I mean, they could have marched into Vienna and dictated terms, gave them light terms after, I believe it was Königgrätz, was the battle. Because he knew later down the line we're going to need Austria as an ally. And, you know, to this day, they're pretty... I mean, a lot's happened, so you can't really draw a straight line between now and then. But contrast that to, like, say, the Nazis and their stunning brutality. And they lost half their country because of it. Germans east of the Oder were ethnic cleansed, so... When you bring up the strategic thing, it's also, I like that you did that because it's not just out of the goodness of your soul. It's that if you do that, if you violate the rules of law, or laws of war rather, so blatantly, you better hope you win. I mean, you better hope you win, or you are fought, royally fought.
Well,
exactly. And you can go ahead.
So that's like how like open war works. But what about when we're talking about covert war? I mean, because this seems to be what the modern condition is, where there's sort of open conflicts and they get handled in a particular type of diplomatic, theatrical kind of way. then there's covert conflicts where the rules are completely different. There seem to be way less rules for those types of conflicts. Maybe talk about that.
Sure. So you're talking about open warfare. Open warfare is military. You talk about secret warfare, you're talking about either black operations, psychological operations, covert operations, or intelligence. Now, intelligence technically is a different subject than war, but obviously it's directly related, right? So intelligence is fieldcraft, it's spy work, but obviously spying is part of war. Now, Black Ops and PsyOps are different. Black Ops is the ugliest part of this. Black Ops is, what do they call it? Credible deniability and... Yeah. So what it means is you're going to be asked to do something illegal that is completely against all ethics and morality and law, and therefore you're going to be expected to do it without any actual support. So it's like this weird maneuver that people do, where they say, well, we can't, under the rules of law, tell you to blow up a hospital, but we want you to blow up a hospital, and we're going to order you to blow up a hospital, but you have to understand that if you get caught doing it, we're going to deny that we told you to do it. We're not going to own it. And this is where shit gets really dicey, because then if it's war and you send your troops to attack something and they get caught and stopped, you have to say, okay, we, the Russians, sent the Russian soldiers to attack the Chinese base. We were defeated. We need our 30 guys back. We're sorry, like, whatever, we did it. And this is like negotiations. But with Black Ops, you'll say, oh, no, we didn't do that. Those were Russian terrorists. They were not Chinese special forces. They were Russian terrorists. And you literally try and disown your own operations. And that is honorless combat. So that's why they call it Black Ops, because it has no honor whatsoever. Because that's why you have to wear a uniform. Like, what's the difference between a terrorist and a soldier? Well, a soldier has what's called a jacket. A martial artist has a jacket. A corrections officer or a police officer has a jacket. Law enforcement has a jacket. Jiu-jitsu fighters, UFC fighters, they have a jacket. And what that jacket means is you have like a reputation, a martial reputation that you carry on your back, right? So in my gym, we have a patch, and you're not allowed on the mat unless you wear your patch. If you don't have your patch, you can't go on the mat. You have to represent your team. Then, once you do represent your team and you wear that patch, anything you do is held accountable to that. So if your people are known for being rude and crude and spitting on the floor, well, that dishonors your whole team. The reason that terrorists are different than soldiers is they don't wear a patch. They don't identify themselves. They don't wear visible markings, and therefore what they do is not accountable. And they'll do things like use child soldiers, suicide bombers. So you essentially have to declare yourself. Like, you have to declare yourself as a combatant. If you're not willing to declare yourself as a combatant, then nobody can hold you to account for any kind of law. If nobody can hold you to account for any kind of law, you can commit any kind of crime. And this is why we call some people soldiers and war heroes and other people terrorists. It's just like, if you're not willing to put on the flag of Canada or the flag of America or the flag of Britain and fight for your country, then you're a soldier. But if you just like wear civilian clothes, throw a grenade into a fucking cafe and run off, you're not a soldier, you're a terrorist. That's honor. Like, it's law. It's the laws of war. So even in the act of killing, there's law.
Fun fact, they call it the SAC group, or SAD group, formerly in the CIA. Delta Force does some stuff. There's some other groups around in the U.S. Army that do shit around the country that are totally Black Ops and say it's in the interest of national security. That's why you don't hear a lot of people like being picked off for fucking terrorist shit in the United States. Like, there's really not a lot of it because they just fucking kill the guys and take them out if they think they're even close.
Yeah, but doesn't it seem like that type of conflict, that type of Black Ops conflict is sort of where the cutting edge is of modern combat? I mean, it seems to kind of be a result of how powerful modern weaponry is. When you have nuclear weapons, you're not going to have full open war because it's in no one's interest. So instead you have covert war, and that's where the real sort of conflicts take place, and then the rest seems to be this type of psyops theater that occurs on the surface that everyone sees, while the actual fight takes place, you know, in terms of Black Ops.
Well, that's
Well,
one
that
thing.
remains to be seen because it's more a result of a unipolar world where you pretty much have one superpower and maybe it can near your peers and everyone else is below. So who's going to openly challenge the United States? I mean, nuclear weapons might have a break on that, but the fact of the matter is we have not seen a situation where it actually thought that was possible. But with the
And
resurgence of Russia, the rise of China, who knows how far they'll go. When you see a world that breaks into different poles, and we finally have something that we haven't really seen since like 1939, most people are more fond of comparing it to 1914. We'll see. We'll see if, you know, ISIS is just the way it's going to be into the next 3 centuries, or if we see a return not only of great power politics, because there is more than one great power, not just one big dog and everyone's sniping, but you have multiple people where it's like, yeah, we could actually win a war. What really is to stop people from, in that scenario, launching?
well, yeah,
To see.
Well, I
we
mean,
have more generals than we had in World War II right now. I think we have 144 generals right now. Fuck, the Air Force has over 3,200 colonels right now. I mean, there's a lot of people, 2.2 million active, something like that. I mean, the U.S. Army China has a larger standing army than we do. But the real blue pill for all you fucking idiots out there, there's 3 factions of aliens playing proxy wars with all of these people.
but
Sure, and that's called exopolitics, and that's a subject for a different day. But for now, we're going to
Right.
talk about human conflict, right? Because exopolitics is a totally different level of analysis.
so I think
Go
that
ahead, Mobius.
I think maybe one of the interesting things that Surprise is bringing up here, and I don't know if you guys have talked about it or not yet, but you know, you can instill some sort of game theory into how war, you know, insinuates more social change or less social change, and how game theory can be applied to the United States within. I firmly think that we thought we won the game at the end of the Cold War, you know, in 1991 when the Soviet Union dissolved. Our fairly obvious failure in Iraq and Afghanistan being proof of this. And in fact, what happened instead is that instead of winning the game, we lost the ability to make friend-enemy distinctions, which is something that I would say is a very big problem with, let's say, liberalism as a whole. In fact, it's a classical critique from Carl Schmitt that eventually, you know, once you stop playing this game where you have defined enemies, you don't know who they are or where they're going to attack from. Because India, for example, is a rising superpower. You know, they now have the capacity to launch satellites into space. You know, they're a top 10 economy. They're industrializing insanely quickly, working off of the infrastructure of the British Raj, and nobody's talking about them. And so I think that might be an interesting point to talk about with regards to the art of war, is finding out how to really dignify and make significant knowing who your enemies are.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, and that goes into what Mitch brought up in the chat earlier. When he said, well, really, there might be 4 tiers. So tactics, operations, strategy, and the grand strategy. And yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts on what the U.S.'s grand strategy, but we don't have to get into that right now. But India would definitely play a part in that.
Well, I think that we're still working on Kissinger's conception of interdependence theory, like of interdependent economic theory, and then, oh gosh, what was the other one? It's called constructed ambiguity, which I think actually Donald Trump is very good at, which is, you know, you say the truth in private, let's say, but then you say something insane in the public, changes the capacity for diplomacy to go as maybe they thought. This happened classically with Kissinger in the 1970s when they signed what happened is that Bashar al-Assad's father wanted to create a United Arab Federation, and that, huh? Go
Oh
ahead,
no,
Sabrina.
I was saying, yeah, Hafez al-Assad.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he wanted to use the Palestinians as a means to unify the Middle East, you know, against Israel and, let's say, the U.S. And Kissinger went in and lied to Assad to his face and had Assad, Syria, and Egypt sign 2 separate treaties. And he set it up in such a way that if Assad denied the treaty that he didn't know he was going to sign, that would have, you know, that condemned the Palestinians essentially, he'd be seen as an exile. And so, you know, the private bodyguard of Assad said, you know, a quote, the light went out of his eyes, and all that's left was a rampant hatred for the West. And, you know, it's from that area that we saw the creation of things like suicide bombers and the modern Middle East.
Yeah, I've seen the. I think I've seen the same documentary you have.
Yeah, Hypernormalization, Adam Curtis.
Yes, hell fucking yes. We need to have an Adam Curtis event. For real. Yeah.
I don't think anybody here has 12 to 15 hours to watch like the 3 documentaries.
They should.
Sure we
They
do.
should.
Sure we
There's
do.
like 5
They're great documentary.
that they need. Hell yeah.
I mean, there's so many aspects to war, right? You can start with the basic element of unarmed combat, which is what I specialize in. How does one unarmed man kill another unarmed man in unarmed combat? But then it changes if you add dimensions. So the UFC, I love it because it's the perfect embodiment of one-on-one unarmed combat. But as soon as one person has a weapon, it completely changes. So MMA is the appropriate way to fight someone who doesn't have a weapon, but if someone has a weapon and you don't, you need Krav Maga. Krav Maga teaches you how to fight against a pistol, a bat, or a knife when you don't have such a thing. But then if you also have a knife or a sword, then you're talking melee combat, which is then you're talking about, like, I don't know, Kung Fu or HEMA, you know, historical European martial arts. It's called HEMA. That's like long sword fighting. You know, that's what Sir Shattuck does. He left the room, but he's like one of these HEMA guys. They do like historical medieval combat. Now, once you add tactical weapons, then you're talking about operations. You're talking about like paintball or airsoft or actual live fire simunition or actual live fire combat operators. Like, and you can have team combat. Like, there's just so many levels, right? You can have 1-on-1, 1v2, 2v2, 2v1, one with weapon, one against weapon. Like, it's never ending. Like, and you got drone warfare, and then you get into nowadays, you got automated warfare, robotic warfare, AI warfare, unmanned aerial vehicles, nuclear weapons, post-nuclear weapons, hypersonic nuclear cruise missiles. Putin now has this device that can go, the Avangard? I think it's called the Avangard. Anyways, it moves 34 times the speed of sound. How it does this, I have no idea, but it's so fast that essentially it can't be countered, so then you have mutually assured destruction. You got cyber warfare, biological warfare, you know, you can have genetic warfare, psychological warfare. Like, there's no end to this, right? But what you have to realize is everything ultimately is military. All military operations are psychological, and all psychological operations are military. The best way to defeat someone is without firing a shot. And the most effective form of war is social engineering and propaganda, especially what's called black propaganda. So what's you going to do? I mean, it's like, how are you going to kill someone? So think about it. Let's say you go into a bar and you want to take somebody's beer. You can indeed say, hey, I challenge you to a fight, and if I win, I'm going to take your beer. And then you square up and you have a kickboxing match, and whoever wins gets the beer. But you could also walk over and get your girlfriend to walk over there and, like, pull her fucking miniskirt up and, like, shake her ass. And then when he turns and looks at her, you take the beer and walk off. Well, you just technically accomplished the exact same end without ever exchanging blows. So you didn't have to get hit. You didn't have to hit him. Was that war? Or is that war by another means? Like, does it only become war when you fight? Or if you avoid fighting by strategically winning without fighting? I mean, Sun Tzu said, you know, defeat your enemy without fighting. So therefore he would say that it's war even and especially if you never draw a sword.
Well,
right? Like,
sorry about that. Go ahead, Shogun. I didn't mean to go.
No, please, you go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Well, I think once again, maybe we can talk about Trump in this regard. He obviously is waging economic warfare. And, you don't need to destroy somebody's house to kill the family inside of it or shut down a country by bombing it. These are old ways of winning. They're a little bit too honest, maybe you could even say. The modern way to really win a battle is to make sure that you can turn the population, the civilian population, against the people who are making these decisions. You turn the population against the sovereign to the point where you get a revolution. This is where, a French Revolution is the classical example. And what's happening in Hong Kong right now is the modern day example, where you have people, civilians, who are getting shot and killed for American ideals that Americans don't have to support in any meaningful fashion. We don't have to give them weapons. We just have to give them ideas, and they're more than willing to die. This is the same type of warfare that the terrorists in the Middle East have been using against the U.S. And I think, once again, one of the reasons why this is so easily applied to, I think the reason why psychological warfare has become the modern form of warfare, the warfare of communications between the sovereign and the people, is because we've reduced the political to the economic. We've reduced the possibility of creating an identity to what you have instead of having it fulfilled in a leadership position and having, a telos or a goal or some sort of virtue ethics or something like that, a national identity even. And that's why it's working so successfully, especially in places like Hong Kong, in places like France, or even Germany and
What about,
Russia.
sorry for dropping my business, what about North Korea?
Well, North Korea is, I think, a special circumstance because they've gone all in on that hermit kingdom idea. And they, frankly speaking, they don't have the carrying capacity given their technology to really support what they've created. And so they've become interdependent on China. So they're going to probably stay the way that they are now in perpetuity. I think they've created a working dictatorship that nobody's going to touch until China collapses, maybe in the next 5 or 6 years. I don't really have any ideas on their psychology, except that it's absolute control.
And this is the thing, right? So, we're kind of bypassing, it's so complex. There's no real way to methodically go through it from unarmed combat to melee combat to tactical combat to war and this and that. So we're going to just jump around freely, anything to do with war. But if you look at modern warfare, the superpowers militaries are so powerful that the quote-unquote, advantage that, for example, the United States Army has over China and Russia, they say, well, we have all these more, aircraft carriers, B-2 Spirit bombers, we have the F-22, we have the F-35. So their weapons platforms are infinitely superior. People don't realize how massive this gap is. So America has, maybe surprise knows. Do you know how many aircraft carriers America has? Surprise? Or even approximately?
I believe we have 10 with 4 on the water.
We have 11.
14 with another 6 on the platform.
Yeah, we have. 20.
Okay, so close to 20
if you count
aircraft carriers.
amphibious as well, it's like 24 if you count the helicopter carriers.
Okay, so between 20 or 24 or 15 to 20 aircraft carriers. Does anyone know how many Russia has? And again, Russia is the number 2 military in the world. So number 1 is America, number 2 is Russia, number 3 is China.
2.
They have 1 aircraft
I
carrier.
don't
They
mean to
sold
cut
the
you
other
off,
one.
Shogun, but they got 2.
They sold 1 to China, actually.
Yeah, actually,
China
Russia
has 2.
Russia or out of China. China was trying to actually build the fucking aircraft carrier, and they turned around and Russia ended up how did it go? Russia bought it from them? Got the majority built, and then China ended up taking ownership of it. That's how that went.
To clarify, the aircraft carrier they bought, while being designed by the Russians, it was part of the old Soviet fleet and was actually constructed in the Ukraine and bought off the Ukrainians, even though it was designed by Russia, going back to the Soviet Union era.
Yes, and
Right.
it
It's
was
really
towed too. It was towed to a Chinese port.
Okay, so here's what I was trying to say though. America has close to 20 aircraft carriers. 20. And the number 2 military has 1. And their 1 aircraft carrier is some old school thing that burns this particular kind of fuel that creates this giant plume of black smoke. It's called like the General Gorgov or the General Orkov. It's some like cantankerous name thing.
Admiral
And it
Cooper,
literally,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it leaves a trail of black smoke like a kilometer high because it burns this like heavy crude. And just recently the thing lit on fire and a bunch of people died and like it burned through. Like I don't know how the fuck they lit their 1 aircraft carrier on fire. So America has 20 functioning aircraft carriers and the number 2 military has 1 that recently lit on fire. Like it's not even a contest. Now, then you talk about air superiority. Now, does anyone know what the 2 most powerful weapon systems ever created are? Or rather, what do you think the 2 most powerful weapon systems ever created would be? Just hypothetical. It's not a test. I'm just curious what people would say.
I'd say
Yeah, I'd
radar.
say Hellfire missile.
I'd say
and
radar
I'd
has
say-
the ability to control stuff from long range and detect
The
stuff from long
F-35
range.
and
Star
B2.
Wars.
These are all good different
And then
answers,
nuclear
right?
weapons. Those would be the
Right.
2 most powerful. Radar, nuclear weapons.
F-35 and B2.
So these are all good answers. So some of the answers was the F-35. It's the most sophisticated aerial weapons platform ever invented. It cost $1.5 trillion. The most expensive weapon system ever invented was the F-35. Total cost of about $1.5 trillion with a T, dollars for the F-35. The F-22 has essentially never been defeated. In simulations, a single F-22 can kill almost like an indefinite number of other planes because its superiority, it's basically invincible. Like it's just so superior. The F-22 has had aerial superiority for over a decade. The B-2, the Spirit Bomber, is the single most expensive and powerful weapons platform unit by unit. And a B-2 is invisible. It carries enough nuclear ordnance to basically destroy the world because it could initiate a global thermonuclear war. So the B-2, right, the F-35, the F-22, now an aircraft carrier technically is the biggest force projector that exists because if you say the F-22 and the F-35 are the most powerful weapon systems, well, what does an aircraft carrier carry? F-22s and F-35s in squadron level. So if you can deploy and here's the craziest thing, fucking aircraft carriers are like 1,000 meters long. Like they're huge. They have 27 decks. Think about
All
that.
right, Key, what's the biggest high kill ratio right now for any weapon right now in the United States?
The handgun, the pistol. I mean,
No, it's done by drone.
Nuclear
No.
bomb.
Right? No, I'm telling you, it's by drone attack. Right now, with the Predator drones, the United States have dished out fucking tens of thousands of people. All right.
Well, fair enough. I mean, drones and Hellfire missiles are all powerful. All these are powerful.
Hold on, Shogun. You brought up how good of fucking airplanes are, this, that, the other thing. But you literally have an airplane behind somebody at a joystick anyway, regardless. And some of these things are so small, they cannot even fucking detect them by radar. That's the next fucking factor in evolution that we're looking at, is how we're going to start detecting these little fucking little fucking crappy little robots.
You're right, Paulie. But let me get through this, all right? So we can discuss this, but I just want to lay out the candidates. If you were to say what is the most deadly weapon system ever invented, obviously you can say nuclear weapons, right? Hiroshima, Nagasaki, you just fucking bomb a city, flash a light, everyone's dead.
Bomb.
80,000, yeah.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I would actually say the most deadly weapon ever existed is not a aircraft carrier. It's not the F-22. It's not the F-35. It's not the B-2 Spirit Bomber. It's not the Hellfire missile or the Predator drone. It's the handgun, the pistol. Because a pistol, you can put it anywhere. You can conceal it in your sock, in your waistband, in your pocket, in your pants, in your hoodie, in your jacket. You can whip it out. You can kill 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20 people. You can conceal it again. You can move. It's cheap. It's small. It's concealable. It's portable. Like, the pistol, to me, is honestly the most frightening weapon that exists. I think the pistol is the most malicious, dangerous, destabilizing weapon. It's not the nuclear weapon. It's not the aircraft carrier. It's not the F-22. It's the handgun. But it just depends what order you're looking at.
And also, the handgun is accessible by nearly everyone.
I mean,
Wouldn't time
whereas
be
the one reason why I kind of like a contention towards that is because, you know, I do handgun training, you know, on a fairly regular basis. I go to the range about 4 days a week, and I, you know, practice with police officers there. You know, I'm trying to join the military, so need to know how to shoot right. And the amount of necessary training it takes to actually become adept at using a pistol to do what you're talking about, even killing like 2 or 3 individuals with a pistol, that is like incredibly high level. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't do it and that, you know, you throw enough paint at a wall and eventually it'll turn blue or whatever. But the amount of training, you know, I had to put in, you know, and I really care about this stuff. You know, I load my own rounds, everything. You know, I'm going out tomorrow to collect lead, to, you know, make some more bullets, etc. You know, it takes tens of hours and hundreds of hours over years to really become proficient with that kind of weapon. There's a very heavy skill curve with pistols.
Well, absolutely sure, but I would say it's actually one of the lowest skill curves in the sense that if I'm a crackhead or a drug dealer and I have a Glock or what's another main pistol other than a Glock?
Yeah, a Glock is good, like a Springfield XD. Yeah.
Right. So let's say I'm a crackhead. I've never fucking shot at a range. I've never trained. If I go into a gas station, a 7-Eleven, I can have that pistol in the band of my pants, right, in between my butt crack. I simply pull it out, point it directly at a person, and pull the trigger and shoot him in the chest. I mean, he's going to die. I don't need to go to the fucking range 4 times a week. I mean, you don't need pistol combat training to shoot someone in the face. You don't need pistol combat training to put a gun in a woman's mouth and say, you know, get on the street and make my money, bitch, and then pull the trigger. Like, this is the pistol. The reason I hate the pistol, to be honest, I actually kind of hate this weapon, is it is a weapon of pimps. It is a weapon of drug dealers. It is a weapon of criminals. It is a weapon of just kind of malcontents. Like, it's not really a military weapon. It's largely a criminal weapon.
Shogun, you're absolutely right, man. And out of the 12,000 fucking deaths every year, or was it 15,000? 12,000 of them in the United States are done by handguns. Yes. And
yeah, it kills more than anybody else. Pistols.
All right. Okay,
not AR-15.
It does. But listen, though. The actual fucking registered fucking gun owners with pistols literally didn't participate in any one of those fucking kills. It was all illegal.
Well,
right?
And we're not gonna get into firearms law today. That's a completely different event, right? To talk about should people have guns, should they be legal, what kind of guns, like that's a totally separate event that we will do. This is tactics, strategy, and the art of war. But I'm just saying, if you ask me what is the most lethal weapons system, I honestly wouldn't say it's an aircraft carrier, because an aircraft carrier, it can go all over the world, it can move extremely fast, it can deploy an insane amount of ordnance, an insane amount of sustained damage. And the reason that an aircraft carrier is the #1 force projector is because they're self-sustaining. So a single aircraft carrier can go anywhere on Earth, deploy fighter jets that can then go anywhere in the sky, drop missiles on anything on land, and they can maintain that without any support for like a huge amount of time. They're nuclear powered. They don't need
3
fuel.
years.
No,
it's crazy.
And the worst jets too. Like you said, B-2, F-114, F-22. You said all that, but you haven't said the B-1 bomber, and you don't even probably know what the B-1 bomber.
I don't know what the B-1 bomber is. I only know the B-2, the Spear bomber.
Okay, the B-1 bomber is a slept wing. All right, and it literally goes from a fucking open wing, like the F-16, and it's a closed wing fucking type plane that's super hypersonic. Like you're talking 2.1, 2.3 Mach, all right? And all it has to do is, like, in this crazy bomber, that one's actually more effective and cost worthy than the actual B2. In my aspect.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm happy to hear that, and I want to know about that. But what I'm going to say is, if you're talking about pure concentrated military hardware, there's only 3 contenders. One is the aircraft carrier, one is the B-2 Spirit bomber, and the third would be the F-35. Now, the F-35 is a 5th generation stealth fighter jet. The aircraft carrier is a naval force projector, which in a way is like a mobile fucking army. Like if you have an aircraft carrier, a single aircraft carrier group, is essentially defeat any country in the world. Like there's really no country that can even fight one aircraft carrier group. And this is actually really fascinating to me. According to conventional military understanding, an aircraft carrier is basically unsinkable with anything less than a nuclear weapon. Sorry about my cat. But that's crazy to me. Like, why can't you just fire ordnance at this thing and make a hole in it and make it fill up with water and sink? Like, maybe Surprise can answer this. Why is it that you can't just blow a hole? Well, hold on. Surprise is naval associated, at least. So why is it that I can't just fire a fucking powerful rocket launcher or missile at an aircraft carrier below the waterline or at the waterline so it fills up with water? Like, what makes these things so hard to sink?
Makes them hard to sink because they're a moving target and they're in a vast expanse of, I mean, it's like trying to hit a tank. It's almost by, I mean, obviously they are never by themselves. You have carrier battle in the middle of the Mongolian steppe. You got to plot, okay, where, and you're trying to do it from Astrakhan, for instance, on the Caspian Coast Sea. So it's from thousands of miles. So it's like, okay, well, where is this? Where is it going to be? Now, and let's hope that we can get our cruise missile to, you know, plot where it is, hit it exactly where it's going to be. It's hard to, even now with all the technology and with all the growth in anti-ship ballistic missiles, it's very hard to hit a ship at sea. It's very hard to hit like a carrier that's 1,000 miles west of Guam, or east of Guam rather, from say Hainan, China. So they're not. If you hit them, you can sink them. But the thing is, you're not going to get close enough because I mean they're the definition of air support, air cover. You're going to have destroyers, cruisers, attack submarines, screening the formation. So you're not going to get within sight. So you can't just, you know, sail up to it, get within 20 nautical miles. Oh, there's the USS Ronald Reagan. Take it out. So it's got to be from a very, very offset position. And from that offset position, it's very hard to get a missile to be able to go at high enough speeds and to be maneuverable enough to actually crash into the aircraft carrier and do the damage that you.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'd like to take
the battle of the Bismarck.
Hold on, Mobius and credit.
So there's also you might have heard about them. They're called like Starlight missiles, I think. But one of the specific things that make not only the armor of super carriers specifically, but so, you know, they have all of these different areas that create ballast tanks within the holes of carriers, which makes them incredibly difficult to sink, and you can't really drown the engine. The major reason, though, is because they have something called a CWIS. I bet everybody has seen it. It's that, you know, little 20 millimeter Gatling gun that'll take out just about anything within visual range, within 2 or 3 nautical miles. And then you have something called the SM-2, which is a radar-guided anti-missile defense missile system that everything from aircraft carriers to destroyers are outfitted with. Hundreds of these things, you know, upwards of 400 of them. And, you know, they are incredibly accurate. And, yeah, they actually just, like, kick ass. And you can see videos of this on YouTube of them, you know, testing this. And, yeah, kind of amazing, especially when you're aiming at missiles that are going from, you know, beyond visual range, which is what Surprise was talking about. So that's a little bit more of maybe a specific answer.
Well, yeah, CWIS is a fucking great weapon. Absolutely great weapon. It's a close combat, lasts retaliation is where it throws up nothing but a fucking hail of fucking lead. Or, what is it, uranium depleted rounds. Whatever, doesn't matter. It throws up seaways and it throws up a hail of fucking, and that's the last, all right?
Defense.
Last defense to the ship, right there. Okay. Now they have weapons, and some ships do have Patriot systems. And a lot of people don't know what Patriot systems are. Is a missile defense system that actually intercepts incoming fucking missiles. All right, so the missile goes up, fucking pops, and fucking takes out that other missile.
I'll put it in an art of war.
Yeah. So the thing is, right, you can have an F-35 that is essentially unkillable because it's essentially invisible to radar. It can deploy nuclear weapons. It can have an accompanying AI drone swarm. It has metamaterial hull that is sonar and radar absorbing. So it's like visibility is like 300 yards. Like a regular like MiG or Tomcat is visible from like kilometers away, but an F-35 is visible from like hundreds of yards away. So these things are basically invisible. But the thing is, an aircraft carrier can carry a whole fleet of these. They can deploy these. So each of these aircraft carriers are like mobile countries almost, like because they have their own geostrategic space around them. They have their own situational awareness bubble. They have the ability to scramble fighters to intercept anything that enters that bubble. They have an accompanying destroyers and cruisers and submarines, like Surprise said. The craziest thing about these fucking things is how fast they are. Because if you see them, they're like 1,000 feet long, or what are they, 1,000 or 3,000 feet long? I'm not even sure. They're fucking huge. Like, you can't even conceptualize how big they are. You'll be wrong. Are they 1,000? Yeah. And so, but somehow they move faster than a submarine, and apparently faster than a torpedo. So if you fire a torpedo from a submarine at an aircraft carrier that's a 27-story tall building, it's moving so fast you can't hit it. How does it move that fast? How do you move that much mass that fast? I don't understand that, to be honest.
Oh, I mean, my personal trainer, actually, 24-Hour Fitness in 2015, my senior year of high school, was a nuclear engine technician on a supercarrier before he had some sort of like pancreatitis or something like that, and it devolved into an abscess problem, or like he nearly died from sepsis or something like that, and he got kicked out because of it. But he worked on nuclear engines for supercarriers, which is kind of what we're talking about. And I think maybe to answer your question, Shogun, is typing into Google just how large these nuclear reactor engines are. You look at the size of the shaft propellers that these things are moving, the displacement, because everything's ratioed here. And it's hard to get a sense of scale of looking at an engine or a propeller shaft that's 6 feet wide. That's just like the length of the shaft across its radius.
Yeah, you're talking about a 60-ton fucking propeller itself.
Well, I mean, no, the blade. One of the blades is 60 tons.
Oh, one of the blades made
I mean, this is a 106,000-ton vehicle. And
106,000 tons, and it's all propeller.
Yeah.
Fuck, like seriously?
Yeah, the
like,
torque ratios on these things are nasty.
You said it was 106,000 ton, and you're telling me each propeller is fucking 70, 80 fucking...
So, Paul, it seems to me that maybe Mobisun has studied this a bit. He seems to be... So here's a question, Mobisun. What is your interest in the military? You want to be in the military? I mean, this is a derail, but what is your envisioned future in the military?
I'm going to be going in as an 11 Whiskey, which is a combat medic sergeant. After 2 years, I'd like to get upgraded into, it's called 11 X-ray, which would be Special Forces combat medic. which would be detached with Green Berets, you know, other special forces groups like SOG. Yeah, I'd be thrown around after that. I'd like to go green to gold or go in as an officer, hopefully, regardless. You know, if I can't go enlisted, then fine. But that's kind of my goal personally. I've met a lot of people in the military, however. What did you say, Surprise? Sorry.
I just said that's badass. If you want to go for SOG, like, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah. I fucking like, you know, Doug Letourneau is, yeah. I like.
So how old are you, Mobius, soon? If I can
I'm going to be turning 24 in February 14th, so 18 days. So
And then do you have a timeline for when you would take the training or the selection?
Yeah, May 27th.
Test.
That's
You know what you
2020.
should do,
Test.
my friend?
Test.
You should do sub training.
Test.
I don't
no,
know if
thank you.
you're over 60.
Yeah,
You
don't
should
do
do
it.
sub training because that's going to give you a qualification that's going to fucking help you out in the long run. I'm telling you.
I have.
He's going in the army.
All right, my little brother was on the HMCS. You ready? I'm going to fucking almost dox myself. HMCS Protector. All right.
We got you now, Paulie. That was the piece
Yeah,
of
that's
intel we
it.
needed to
There we
identify the
go.
notorious
Blue team,
Paulie.
go.
Now we know who you fucking are. We
the
got you.
fifth
We
level,
got
dude.
you, Paulie.
Yeah,
I'm
but
actually part of the KGB.
Mobius is going in. Mobius isn't going into the Navy.
My little brother, all right, you received the highest award, or you can receive, all right, like in front of like the admiral himself of the Canadian fleet, come up and present to my brother with that award, and it's 2 bars, 2 golden stripes, not like 2 silver stripes. These are golden fuckers, all right. And he's advanced, and if you guys look up the difference between silver stripes, the Canadian military, and golden stripes, to understand. Like, he gave nothing for his life, nothing for anybody else. He just went and took care of what he had to do. All right?
That's kind of the way that I'm about it.
All right, so when the HMCS Protector pulled out of Japan, it lit on fire.
Nice.
The operating room lit on fire. My brother smelled smoke walking down the fucking hallway. All right, and he run to the engine room and put everything out, but literally the first fucking person he had seen goes on the alarm. I'm on my way. All right, by the time they showed up, saved that ship from burning the first time. Second time that ship pulled out of port. No,
I'm a little confused about what the point of this story is. It seems like a little bit of a derail. Is there a point to this? Like, what are you trying to say?
Well, absolutely. Art of war. Make sure your ship's fucking ship shape.
Make sure your ship is not on fire. Step 1.
There you go. That'd be the first.
And if you stop,
thing Art of war.
And then reward
if your
people
ship is on fire,
put it out.
Mobius, that's awesome. Because I joined.
All right, so the second time that happened.
No, be quiet, Paulie, please.
Okay, hold on, let me finish.
No, I was talking to Mobius soon about his special forces plans, and then you started talking about your brother and his ship being on fire, but that wasn't connected
Special
enough to.
And CIA.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's my question, Mobius. So because we're just going wherever this leads, right?
Yeah.
So you're thinking you're going to do selection this year. So have you been doing a lot of physical conditioning?
Oh yeah.
And what does that look like?
Okay, so I'll just go through a standard day, the life of Moby. I wake up at 4:30 a.m. and I start with a 6-mile run. Right now I'm still too heavy to be where I want to be. I want to be able to run consistent 6-minute mile. Right now I'm sitting at about a 7:42, so I'm not happy with that at all, but I also need to lose about another 20 pounds to be where I need to be, so we'll see what happens. I've been down there before in high school, etc., so I know I'm capable of it. So that's what I do in the morning. After that, I shower. I have 1 protein shake. And that's what I'll have for about the next 6 hours. After that, I do everything else I need to get done, whether that's work. I try to work like 4 hours a day since I have enough investments in stocks that I can survive on the diet that I need without having to work 40 hours a week anymore. And so I do that. I do my classes and read my philosophy books.
If I can ask you a question, what is your motivation for wanting to be in the special forces? Right, I get it. You're trying to do physical conditioning. You're trying to be disciplined. But why is this what you want? Why do you want to be an operator?
Well, first of all, I think it's naturally aspiring to, there's almost like there's a heroic romance to it. That's kind of like part of it. That's what initially got me into it, when I was like back in middle school. But as I got older, what it was is there's a book that I'm reading right now. It's called Outlaw Platoon. And it's about a platoon up in Afghanistan. And it starts off with this, 15-page passage about watching a little Afghan girl get her foot blown off and bleed out in your arms. And that level of trauma in dichotomy with maybe the love that you have for the brotherhood and the camaraderie, I think, it gives you several lifetimes worth of experience. And it's one of the few places where you can have a real black and white perception on some very core values that seem to have been devalued. Things like trust, care, compassion, being objective with your compassion. That is, the ability to sacrifice properly. And these noble perceptions is what SF is all about. And you do it quietly. It's humble. You sign a contract saying, I'm not going to tell anybody, even the people I love most, what I've done for the next 20 years or until I die. And I'll carry on. And that's the type of person I want to be. And so I'm going to do it.
Well, and I'm not, go ahead, NSA.
I've met those guys. You're going to have to do a lot of things. You're never going to fucking look down. I would be careful about wishing for that.
I know.
That's basically what I wanted to say too, right? Because one thing I asked you is, why do you want to do this? And you said, well, you're going to have this black and white morality, right? Like the bad guys, good guys, defend your people. Your buddy's got his legs blown off, drag him out. The bad guy comes in, you got to kill him. But really, it's not that way, right? I've talked to Rhodesian, I've talked to Sloopy, guys who've seen combat, and they say, well, for example, if you're in Afghanistan, now special forces is very, very different than the military. It's actually much less traumatic. If you're going to be military, you better be special forces, because special forces guys have a much lower rate of PTSD than regular military. Why? Because special forces, not only are they more elite and they're more highly trained, but the main thing is they are initiators of violence, whereas military guys are recipients of violence. So if you're a military guy, you're driving around your ATV, your Humvee, and you're just boring, boom, and then you're like, what the fuck? And it's an IED, or it's
all reaction.
Yeah, you're going around knowing this. You never know, when am I going to get attacked? When am I going to get attacked? When am I going to get attacked? And then boom, you're attacked, and you don't see it coming. Then your ears are ringing, your buddy's guts are everywhere, you're screaming, and you don't fucking see it coming. So you're fucked up. Whereas the special forces, they go, here's target A1, he's moving from target AB to 2-1, initiate at 342, you come out, you shoot these people, you kill them, and you go. And so you get to initiate the force, right? You're the operator. So it's the agency. It's the sense of agency and being the one who initiates violence. That is what takes away. If you initiate the violence, it's not traumatic. If you not nearly as traumatic.
No,
but
because
if you
you've already justified it.
Well, you've justified it, and you had a sense of autonomy, and you had a sense of agency. You got a sense
you're not
of control.
a victim to it, yeah.
Exactly. But the thing is, in terms of morality, no, it's not going to be black and white. So let's say you're a special forces guy, and you're sweeping a building, and you see a little kid with a suicide vest on. What do? Do you shoot? Well, yeah, you shoot him in the head before he detonates his suicide vest, because if the child detonates his suicide vest, he kills you and your friends. So you have to kill the child. But is that morally black and white? And here's the thing. Why, well, is it though? Because why were you in Afghanistan? You were born in Idaho or Ohio or fucking Toronto or Texas. Why are you in Saudi Arabia? Why are you in Afghanistan? Why are you in Iraq? Why are you killing a child in his own country? And yes, tell me about Tim Kennedy.
Yeah. Well, I watched the Jocko podcast number 27 with Tim Kennedy. And I think he answered that question perfectly when he said, look, the people that we're going out there to kill are not human beings. They are monsters that put suicide vests on children and make me shoot them so I can save my men. That's
but the
why
thing is,
as soon as I lose my ability to rationally understand that is evil, then I have no ground to stand on, and I put up my gun.
sure, but you can say, okay, using a child soldier is unambiguously a war crime and evil, and so you lose the moral high ground. But I would also say, if they're defending their country and their own culture, right? If I'm in Afghanistan, like I'm a Canadian, right? So let's say the American government occupies Canada. Well, if I use children to carry weapons, or whatever, that's evil. Like, I shouldn't be involving children in war, period, full stop, doesn't matter. But if you're invading and occupying my country and you're the aggressor, it's not morally black and white. You can't just say your method of war is evil, but I initiated this war and invaded your country and you're fighting me, trying to repel my invasion or my occupation. How can you say that you have a moral high ground? Like, how can you say that if you go to Iraq or Afghanistan and you literally left your peaceful country, your peaceful liberal democratic country, and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate. I'm not taking a position on this. I'm just playing it out. How can you say that you go from your peaceful American country that hasn't been attacked by Iraq or Afghanistan, you get on a ship or a plane, you go all the way over there, you get your gun, you go into this country, and you're in fucking, whatever city, I can't think of a city in Iraq right now, for whatever reason.
Like Ramadi,
Baghdad. And then there's Fallujah, right? And there's some child who has a gun. And you go, oh my God, the child has a gun. I shoot him. But you literally got on a plane, left your country, flew across an ocean, got off the plane, got in a car, drove to a city, and then got attacked and then killed a kid. Is that morally black and white just because they were using a method of war that, by the way, they had no choice but to use because you had such overwhelming military superiority conventionally that you forced them to engage in quote-unquote terrorist ways? And again, please understand, I'm not defending this, but this is the geostrategic policy. The weaker force always engages in guerrilla warfare, insurgency, terrorism, IEDs. Like, look at Vietnam. Vietnam was
or Venezuela.
Exactly, they have to. So that's why the Tim Kennedy thing. Tim Kennedy is a good soldier, right? So I would expect nothing less of him. He's saying what a good soldier has to say, to think what he has to think, to do what he has to do, and that makes him good at what he does. But if I take a step back, I'd say, wait a minute, this actually doesn't check out. So if I'm looking at Vietnam, and the American Empire decides to invade Vietnam because they're allied with North Vietnam, and it's a Soviet proxy state.
China,
Right, and then the Vietnamese, use booby traps or poison or whatever method that they can. I can't be like, well, they're using dirty tricks, so they're the bad guys. Well, no, you're invading their country. So whatever tactic they use to defend their country, you are the aggressor. And the number one rule of law, in my opinion, is who's the aggressor, who's the defender. Now that gets really dicey because, you were going to attack us, so we attacked you before you could attack us. Like, who's really the aggressor? If you're building nuke bases and then we invade to stop you from building the nuke bases, like, it's not black and white. But at the end of the day, if you invade another country that hasn't attacked you first, aren't you the bad guy, ultimately?
I don't think so at all. I think because I know exactly where that comes from. That's the Christian justification for war. The Christian justification for war essentially dictates also the separation between terrorism and justified war. That's the classical use. And generally speaking, a justified war is a war in self-defense. The problem with that is, I think at the end of the day, and maybe quite a few people here would agree with me, is that you have to there has to be a point where you say, okay, the moral and ethical values of other cultures become less valuable and become immoral in consideration to modernity or to the West, to the modern superpower. And this is where new justifications for war and terrorism came from. This is why the IRA is no longer considered a terrorist threat. It's because it's been formally recognized by the UN. That's just the most recent example of a terrorist organization being justified or legitimized. But at the end of the day, any monopolar power or even a bipolar power, like a hegemony of some sort, going to war with each other for geopolitical dominance has to have the strength and be willing to bear the burden of saying, no, your culture is backwards and wrong. And we need to instill or justify, we need to instill some level of morality or control in this area. Otherwise, I was just listening to to another Jocko podcast, it's 5 hours long. It's about that platoon, outlaw platoon, where the Afghan guard, he's seen the Russians come in and fuck up his country and leave. He saw the U.S. come in and left, etc. He's been watching people rape his country for 30 years, and the guy walks up to the troops, gives them a casual nod, sits on the side of the street, and then shits on the ground, and then wipes his ass with his left hand and takes along on his day. It isn't to say that they're lesser people or anything like that. Everybody has the capacity to be good individuals. But just because you're born in a culture that's immoral by its own value system doesn't mean that you're innocent of the consequences or you're free of people trying to change it for the better, which is what I think at least the United States was trying to do in the Middle East, or what most of the soldiers thought they were trying to do, including special forces.
And I would disagree with that to an extent. Like I'm invincibly confident in the Western way of life. I'm known on this server to call people who don't speak English barbarians, and mean it. It's not a meme.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I look at more of the John J. Mearsheimer school of thought, which is like you do what is in your country's interest. It's not if it's in your interest to change a culture, if their backwardness, which is why I think Afghanistan ultimately was a good idea. Iraq was not.
Yeah,
if it's in
that's
your
why he's an
interest,
Afghan police guard.
exactly. I noticed that too. That was good. If it's in your interest and if their way of life is impinging on your interest or even your security, because I look at those, I'm not squeamish about it. Like sometimes your interests have nothing to do with the flag and the Constitution. It's just, this is some dirty shit we got to do to maintain our way at the top.
Oh yeah.
But even if it's deeper than your interest, if it opposes, if it's a genocide and it's against your ideals, so like your interests are not even at the forefront anymore, then by all means. But if it's just, they're different from us and we don't like them and we fought a war against them, what was it, 10 years ago, 12 years ago when we invaded Iraq, 1991 to 2003, then no, because that's a waste of blood and treasure. And then you have the Justinian model, where Justinian was trying to reconquer the West, weaken the Persian border, and if it wasn't for Heraclius, who should be a saint in every church, they almost lost that entire thing. Like, you got to focus. Like, if you were a strategic advisor in Byzantium, you would say, don't worry about fighting over Italy. Like, let the fucking Ostrogoths keep it. Your main problem is the Persians. Same thing with this. If it's just a drain on your blood treasure, and your real thing is, you need to focus on the fucking Chinese. Like, don't worry about Saddam. Then it doesn't matter how backward they are. Let them shit in the streets.